All right, welcome back to another episode of Realty Resilience. I'm Dave Nations, your host, and I'm extremely excited today about our guest that we have, Tim Landy. Tim Landy and I have known each other since, since you were born, forever. And we grew up together, family, friends, and everything. And then Tim jumped into real estate, and we've stayed in touch, and he's down in Austin. And I've been to Austin quite a bit with Keller Williams headquartered down there. And actually, Tim just closed a deal for us that we referred to him. And anyways, I'll let him do his own introduction, but I'm really excited about Tim and what he's done and what he's built. And so, Tim, go ahead and jump in. Tell us, a little background on yourself and how you got to where you are.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief. As you said, born and raised in St. Louis, actually. And then after college, I started working for Anheuser-Busch, and that's how I randomly arrived in Austin, Texas back in 2008. That certainly was not part of the plan, but got in there and started doing that for a while. Was in the beer business. It was great because I met a lot of people very quickly. Austin's a very social town. Everyone's very outgoing and kind of accepting and welcoming because it's a big melting pot. A lot of people aren't from Austin, but you still get that southern hospitality. So looking back on it, while I look at, I was selling beer, I was also creating a network, and I didn't realize it. And then after doing that for several years, I just kind of lost my, I was never really fulfilled selling beer. And I bought my first house in 2010, and the agent that I worked with, he did a great job. He's with KW. He did a great job of following up with me, constantly, just like staying on me, staying top of mind. He used to say, you should get your license and join my team. And I kept like brushing him off. And then as I finally reached my point where I was just really sick of the corporate world, I had a manager at the time that loved reports because a report was a report and filled his box in, and like they weren't doing anything with that report. I was just kind of burnt out. And he called me on the right day, and I'm like, all right, let's chat. What does that mean to be on a real estate team and for me to get my license, and like what does life look like? So that was 2012. I ended up getting my license. It only took me like 3 weeks to get my license. That's how motivated I was to get out of the corporate world, jump into real estate. And it was 2 feet. Like I wasn't doing both at the same time. I just waited till I received my bonus check from 2012, and I was full time in 2013.
And so you quit and you went 100% all in.
Yeah, it was dive in with both feet. The whole like burn the boats and storm the island and don't look back. And I went from being very, very social, constantly out doing everything, to real estate's my new thing and just want to put my head down and learn this industry. And it was a lot of riding in the backseat. His name was Ricky. Riding in the backseat of Ricky's car. I wanted to hear the conversation between he and the clients. Like, what questions are they asking? How does he show a house? How does he talk about a neighborhood in an area, et cetera? So, it's constant all day, evenings, weekends, et cetera. I just wanted to immerse myself in it and, shorten that learning curve as much as I could, because as we all know, it's like drinking from a fire hose, especially when you first get in. It's constantly moving. There's so much information, but I didn't just want this to be a hobby or like, I'm going to try real estate and show pretty houses. It was not that. It was like, I really want to learn this and hone this craft.
So your training was legit hands-on. I mean, you guys were in the car driving around, and that was really your training to get it going. How quickly were you able to then get to be a part of a deal?
Within my first 30 days, and I'll credit him, he had business coming in, and the reason he was starting to grow his team and bring on a buyer's agent, he was getting more business than he could handle, and he really wanted to level up on his listings. And so he was like, any buyer that comes in, like, you're going to get that lead, and I'll show you how to work with the buyer. And so I had my first contract within 30 days of starting full time. And that was a benefit of being on a team, being in that ecosystem. So that was good, quick learning.
That's awesome. And so that first full year in, you quit your job and you're all in on real estate. Looking back, was it, at this point, I would say, yeah, it was probably the right move, right? But first year, would you consider it successful? Was it everything you were thinking it was going to be? Did you make the money you want to make? Or was it like, oh man, this was a rough first year, let's see? Or how did that end up for you?
There were definitely moments when I was like, what did I just do? And when you first start out in real estate, like I think the perception of it is far different than what it actually is, especially if you're really trying to, build a good foundation. When I got in, it was still a good market, but even though I had a couple of deals, my goal was to at bare minimum first year replace my salary and benefits, like whole compensation package, while learning the new job. But there were times it ebbs and flows. Like there was times I didn't have anything going on, and I was like, oh, I don't have a paycheck coming in. When I used to have a W-2 paycheck every 2 weeks, I could count on that. And so there were a couple moments where I was like, why did I do this? And then as you kind of keep going through, and then I remember I had a month where I made like double of that bonus check I was waiting on. I was like, oh, remember when I was so like nervous to like get that bonus check before I did that? Now I just had a month where I made double of that bonus check. So that felt good. And then I remember pushing forward further into real estate. And when I had my first month where I made my annual salary in that month. And so then
you had a month where the commission that you made met the same salary you made for the entire year working at Anheuser-Busch.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's a hell of a month. I mean, I don't know what your salary was, but it's got to be good,
It was a little different, that was, back like 2008 to 2012, things were a little bit different then. Sure. But I'm not saying that was every month, but like when I did have that month, that was a nice validator to say, this is what is possible. And so I remember asking this question to Ricky, like, how much is realistic for me to make my first year? And he kind of answered, he goes, you can make zero. You could also make, write a number down. And he's actually right. I think it is possible that you make nothing, or if your goal is to make $100,000, $250, whatever it is, like, it is possible. It just depends on like what you're willing to do.
Yeah. Everybody I always meet that's new wants to make $100,000. Yeah. So in your mind, it's all about the activities. Whatever activities you do are going to get you that, or not going to get you that. Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's treating it like a true profession. It's not I work for myself now. I can wake up at 11 and make my own schedule and just show pretty houses and then go get a fancy lunch. Like there's so much discipline that I think you have to have doing this, because at the end of the day, there's really no one checking on you.
Yeah, that's probably the toughest part, is that lack of accountability when you're on your own. So you're on a team in that case, and you had a phenomenal start into this in first year. What happens next, over the next couple of years?
So I was on that team for about a year and a half. So fast forward to about August of 2014. I decided to part ways, and I think it was kind of mutual, where what I was kind of thinking, I wasn't probably the right fit for them anymore. I don't think it was the right fit for me anymore. One thing I would say that was a big learning for me was they wanted me to put a headset on every day and cold call. And I know agents here that do that, and they're extremely successful doing it. And so if that's the case, keep doing it. Like, that just wasn't how I wanted to build my business. I never enjoyed it. It wasn't something I actually wanted to be good at, was just cold calling all day. So it never just felt like the right thing. And so when I started kind of taking some more meetings and just learning like what else is out there in real estate, I met Paul and Kevin, who became some good mentors when I joined a local firm here. They were heavy in like investment real estate and building wealth through real estate, and kind of taking creative approaches of like really using your network and digging into your network and being a connector, because when you connect to people, they always remember who connected them, and then you're opening up these different networks. And so it was really just how do you use or how do you really dive into the networks that you're part of and the people that you know and that know you, to help them with their real estate needs. And then it's also not just real estate needs, but like you need a good referral for a dog groomer or a dentist, like I'll get that over to you.
So, but you're not from Austin. So, for a guy like you, what's that look like to be the connector and to know, who's who and all that? What did you have to do to make that happen? I mean, I know you'd been there at this point for a few years. Did you just have enough that worked, or did you have to put in a little additional work to make that work?
I'd say all of the above. Going back to being in the beer business, it was a very social position. So I got to meet a ton of people very early on, and you're almost like forced into meeting all of these people. So it's definitely not for the introverted person. So you definitely need a high eye for that, and then obviously for what we do. And so it was really doing the same approach, like just constantly being out there and who are you meeting, and then saying, oh, you should meet my friend Dave because you guys, both like this and you guys would probably get along, or, Dave is looking for this. I just know who the person to ask. Even if I didn't know the right dentist in your area of town, I could go get that answer and get you 2 good recommendations from people I trusted. And so it was really just kind of taking that approach. And then I never realized it at the time, but when someone would ask, hey, I want to remodel my kitchen, can you come over and just kind of give me some tips? And, I think the average person might view that as like, oh, that's a waste of time. Like, I'm just going to go over and give you free advice. And then, you're not listing your house. You're going to remodel your kitchen and love it and live here for the next several years. But what's actually happening is you came up in their mind when something real estate and service related came up. And so you should go with that, because even if they're not listing their house, their neighbor might, their friend might, and they're going to say, Tim came over and helped me with this and provided me with a good designer, a contractor, or gave me some of his industry discounts, things like that. And so you're just constantly trying to create that wheel, and I think when you put that out there for people in a genuine way, it comes back to you.
I love it. So to clarify, you left that team because really you weren't necessarily in alignment at that point with how you wanted to generate business versus how they were. And so then decided to step off that team and then jump into it, doing it a little different way, and really more around relationships as opposed to just the lead genning and prospecting and whatnot. And both models work, don't get me wrong. And so then how did that work out for you? And, how did the business shake out from there?
It was interesting. I tell a story that when I moved over, it was basically like fall of 2014. And I remember being at this happy hour. It's like a charity networking happy hour, and I knew some of the guys there, and we're all standing around having a beer, and just real estate naturally comes up. And earlier that day, I had a conversation with a commercial real estate agent, our broker, and he was talking about these new developments that were happening, and these guys just brought up a certain area of town, and I was able to interject a couple kind of little nuggets of oh, actually this land is about to be this, and here's who's just bought that. And I wasn't even trying to do anything. I was just making conversation, and while we were drinking a few beers, and one of the guys was like, hey, let's go grab coffee. I'm actually interested in buying something. And we had coffee, the next week, and then we ended up buying something. And I was like, I got to kind of choose who I worked with there. It was a great price point, and he wanted to buy in a location that I wanted to work within. So that's when a light bulb went off. How do I do more of that? And you almost can kind of pick and choose who you're working with. Like-minded people are referring like-minded people. And so it was really just, I need to learn the market. I need to really, really become a student of the market, of what's going on and why. What do we think is happening next? And then, put yourself in those situations where you can kind of have a good conversation about it.
Now, did you get in on that deal, or were you just the agent that helped him buy it, or were you helping him buy it, plus maybe you were part owner of it, or I'm just curious?
So on that one, this one was a separate commercial development that was just going to show what was happening in an area. But I think he saw that I wasn't just a door opener at that point. I was actually paying attention to why it could be advantageous to start buying property in this particular area, because there's going to be brand new development that's not even announced yet. This wouldn't make it to the Austin Business Journal for a few months at that point, but this is something that this commercial broker was like, this is happening. These guys have already signed on the dotted line. They're getting their site plan approved and all that fun stuff. So we always kind of joke that insider trading is kind of legal in real estate in that regard, where I can say, you guys might want to start buying in this neighborhood because this piece of land over here is about to be a major mixed-use development with retail, restaurants, et cetera. And it's not even announced yet, but it's legal to do that.
Yeah, I've always said that insider trading about, going on listing appointments, right? You're the first person in the door that knows they're needing to sell. And depending on the situation, you might be able to buy it yourself, right? And it could become a very good investment opportunity, but you know about it before anybody else does because it's not publicly marketed. And depending on their needs, it might be all yours, And in your case, you just happen to know the right amount of information to make it happen. So that's exciting.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so then, so fast forward a little bit. I know, so you started building a team, right, at the new brokerage that you went to over time, and you've started getting into some more investing, like you were saying there. But what did all that look like, and how did the team start to shape up?
Yeah. So the investment and like development part came first. It actually kind of fell backwards into it. This is back in, now we're about 2015. I was working with an investor who's looking to flip some properties, and I was walking a house, and my mentor and good friend Paul was in the office as I was about to leave, and he's like, "I'll go with you." And he was already doing a bunch of this already, so it was nice to have a second set of eyes. And I can't emphasize enough, even if you're experienced, just having that second set of eyes. But if you're still brand new, see if you can latch on with someone and kind of get that guidance, because I was looking at this house purely from a flip standpoint, and he was like, "Why don't you demo this and build a 2-unit condo regime?" And I'm like, "I don't know what that means." Like, what are you talking about? Because this property had an alley access. He goes, "The zoning in this area allows you to build 2 units on this lot. Since there's an alley, one can face the alley, one can face the main street. You file a condo regime, which is just paperwork. You're not having to subdivide. And now you can sell these separately." That all went right over my head. And so he goes, "Let's come back here tomorrow. I'll bring my builder and I'll show you how to run the numbers on it." And so we went from trying to flip this house to, I just put a deal together with some friends. He introduced me to the builder, and the builder said, "This is the bank I like to work with." We got approved with the bank. He ended up doing the project for us, just kind of held our hand through the process. It had your bumps and bruises along the way, as every project does, especially with permitting and dealing with the city. But at the end of it, we had a pretty healthy profit that was much larger than a 3% commission on a buy and a sell. And that was when a light bulb went off, because not only that, your sign's in the yard. We picked up buyer leads off of that. I held open houses at the houses that we built. And so then more clients came off of that. More people called and said, "Hey, I know you're buying teardowns. Here's another deal for you." Or, "I'm thinking about selling my house. Would you buy my house?"
All from that deal?
All from that deal. And so it's like activity breeds activity. And so that was that light bulb of like, the more you're doing, the more the market knows that you do this, the more deals will find you. You still have to be hunting all the time, but you will have some fish that will jump in your boat. So that was super interesting to me. And so I kind of started leaning into that a little bit more. I was like, maybe this can be another facet of my business, because at the same time, I'm also learning the product that we're marketing and selling. I'm seeing the guts of the house. I'm seeing how this is built from start to finish. And I think a lot of agents really don't understand that. They probably can't really tell you, if I said, "Where's the soffit on a house?" I think there's agents out there that don't know what to look for, And so that was super interesting. And so I started leaning into that more. And when I was working with investors and doing my own projects.
Let me ask you a quick question on that. One thing I hear a lot that I'm wondering if people are also thinking right now is, okay, that's great. Where do I get the money? Or how do I even, I get it that you had somebody that essentially teed you up for this and was willing to help you and gave you the builder and the numbers and you guys figured it out. Awesome. I don't have the money to tear this thing down and go build and do all that. Like what do you do?
Neither did I.
Perfect.
It was 2 friends of mine who, just in casual conversation, I already knew that they were investing in real estate. And I just brought it to them. I said, "I found this deal. Here's the preliminary numbers. Is this something that you guys would also want to invest in?" And their answer was they wanted to see the full plan. And so I put pro forma together. But at the end of the day, like, they didn't want any part of the day-to-day. They're like, "As long as you're running it and this is how you're saying this is going to go, and then I just have to send a wire." And then, we did a projection of like 15 months or so to get a return. They were good with it. And so, I signed on the bank note. So I was the one that took the debt on the property, and it was all their cash in the property. And we had our splits of how we were going to run everything. And I was acting as realtor and developer in this. And so what I found is money is probably the easiest part of these projects. There's a lot of money out there. It's finding a deal that actually pencils out, that is intriguing enough for someone to participate in that deal. That is, I think, the harder part of this whole thing.
What I love about that story that you just shared is that it basically was full circle, because the people that you asked for the money had to have been people you connected with and knew, right, and had a relationship with, which then you met down there, like you were talking about, and how do you connect people and how do you, and I totally agree with you. I think that the money holds everybody back, and yet the money is probably the easiest one to come by, whether it's a bank, private money, whatever it is. There's definitely people out there. You have to ask, you got to talk to people, and you're right, especially these days with the market. So just a lot less inventory than when you started in 2020 in 2013. So finding the deals and putting them together, and the economics are just different, right? So it's digging into that, but the money shouldn't hold people back from investing. I love that and couldn't agree more. So.
Yeah, I mean, think about like you and Jeff are very seasoned at this point. If someone were to come to you and say, "Look, I found a deal. I have no money. I have no idea how to do this," you guys would probably totally cut them in and be like, "Hey, we know how to do this though, and you just brought us another deal. So let's make a way to figure this out." It's the same thing. If you have a good deal, whether it's a rental property, a flip, development, whatever it is, just start asking around. You might hear a couple no's, but then you'll hear a yes. And then when you make that person money, they're going to ask, when's the next one? And then they're probably going to tell a couple other people, and then they're going to be like, I also have 2 other buddies who have, whatever cash laying around, or they have cash they need to do something with. Then it just kind of starts going. And so, the golden rule is preservation of capital. Make sure your numbers are tight. Don't lose anyone's money. But if you keep making people money and they're getting better returns doing this than they are in the stock market, or they can do on their own, or if this is just supplemental to what they're already doing, the money's going to be there. And it gets to a point where like you're not having to put together a fancy pitch deck. You're just saying, Dave, here's the next project. Here's what we're doing. Here's how the numbers look. And I already have it under contract. And here's when we're funding. And they're like, great. Send me the wiring instructions and the agreement.
Yeah, and based on your track record, your relationship, the trust, all of those things, people will write you a check because they believe in what you're doing. You're not door knocking, cold calling somebody and, asking for somebody for money. They don't know you, and, you've never done this before or anything, that kind of stuff. So that's huge.
Yeah.
So then you get into doing some investment deals. So you're doing that and still selling?
Yeah, so I was kind of doing both because they kind of communicate to each other. As you've seen, but being a realtor, you're going to find deals, and then like working in deals can also help you on the real estate side, because that's your sign in the yard. Those are your open houses. Those are, your internet leads that can also come in from your listing. So you're also drawing in leads to your real estate business, both retail buyers and sellers. The neighbor might come up to you and say, "What'd you sell that house for?" And, I'm thinking about selling my house. Sounds like you already sold one on the street. I've had where the buyer of one of the houses didn't like the buyer's agent that they worked with, and a year later they called me to sell the house again, because they're like, "You built it, you sold it the first time, no one knows this house better than you." So I sold the house for a second time, and it was great. So I was like, wow, this really can feed each other if you do it the right way. It doesn't happen on every single project, but you have enough out there, it's going to happen. And so it was just really keep doing it and do it the right way.
So where's the team at today? What's the structure of it? How much volume units you guys doing?
Sure. So we started the team in 2020. Interesting time to put a team together. The reason why we did is, so Mike, my business partner, we actually met. He was running bars on 6th Street, and he owned a few when I was in the beer business. When he got out of that, he and I known each other for a long time, and he was a good friend at the time, but I only knew him from like that setting. But what I did know about him was from that whole industry, which can be a little dirty at times. He had a high amount of integrity. I saw him as an extremely hard worker, but his database was very big. That he knows so many people in Austin, so many people in Austin know him, but he was kind of stuck in his downtown bubble. He never really knew. I just basically said, I got to teach him the city and teach him real estate. He has the biggest parts already covered of, having integrity, being a hard worker, and just knowing a ton of people. So he and I started working together, and then after about a year or so, I approached him about, would you ever want to kind of formalize a team here? Because we're already kind of working together. In 2019, we had hired his sister, Callie, to just be our assistant. So we were both individual agents. She was assisting both of us. But I was like, we're already kind of working together as it is. What if we actually formed a team? And like maybe 2 + 2 = 5, and let's explore it. And so we did that, and then we had some people kind of approach us like, hey, I want to join. And so we brought on a couple agents early on, didn't really know what we were doing, just kind of flying by the seat of our pants of like, all right, here's some things that I learned on the previous team, like they did these really well. The biggest thing was, the 2 biggest things I wanted to bring in was make sure we have systems. Everything has to have a system. And then 2, the culture has to be great. And agents should be their own agent, and this is just our model. But I didn't like the fact that I was only able to work with buyers on my previous team because I never saw how listings worked. And then being a listing agent, I can see how other buyers agents are presenting offers and what questions they're asking. And so I also learned how to be a better buyer's agent just by working with other buyer's agents on my listings.
Made you a more well-rounded realtor.
Yeah, exactly. So we started the team 2020. Obviously, that was COVID, so we're all just trying to figure out what's going on at that point. We ended up bringing on some brand new agents, but they caught fire quick. So fast forward to 2021, we ended up doing $109 million with 5 agents, and that was over like 189 transactions in our first year. So obviously, the market conditions in Austin were about as good as they can get. I mean, you could put a Post-it note on a house and you're gonna have a line out the door with multiple offers and say, we're thinking about selling. So we also had that working for us. We also just had some good agents that were just really hungry and very hardworking. It was good and bad because we got off to a really quick start, but I think it gave us a false sense of success of like, we know what we're doing. We just did 109 million. We've basically been doing this team for a year.
That is an insane first year, by the way. So
yeah. I'll admit, I think we kind of got a little bit of arrogance to us when we, not to like clients or whatever, but just kind of like, yeah, we know what we're doing. Like we have a good team here. And then the market started pulling back and we started seeing the holes in the ship when all that happened. The whole cliche of like, you see who's not wearing pants when the tide goes out, that it felt like us because, the market stopped moving where it was. We essentially trained everyone on our team to leave us. They're like, oh, we know what we're doing now. We had one agent do 24 million. The other agent did 30 million. He won Rookie of the Year. She was runner-up Rookie of the Year with the Austin Board of Realtors. So like, again, we thought we knew what we were doing. And
well, you did. You did sell a lot of real estate, so you guys knew something,
Sure. So all those agents left to go be individual agents, which we wore that as a badge of honor at the end of the day. People are going to come and go. That's just the nature of it. Then we brought on 3 other agents, and all 3 of those agents are not even in real estate anymore. So that was incredibly humbling. So at the time, we were in a coaching program through Tom Ferry, and we basically asked our coach, like, it's time to strip this thing down and rebuild the foundation. And so we went down. At one point, it was just Mike, Callie, and I again. And we just rebuilt from the very beginning.
Why did you, at that moment, feel like you had to go backwards to go forwards? What was it that you're like, this isn't working?
Because all those original people left. So one of them went to Sotheby's. Another one went just individual at our brokerage, and he started a team at our brokerage. Another agent got recruited away by the #1 agent in Austin. So like that was tough to, have her leave the door. But again, like we wore that as a badge of honor. But from a team model standpoint, it's like, man, we need to reload. Like we need to get more agents in here so we can run it back and do the same thing. And so we just found some people that, reached out and were like, yeah, these seem great. Let's bring them on and do the same thing we did last year. And just, it was different. The market was different. They were different. Like they didn't have like that hunter mentality that the previous agents had. And again, like they just couldn't get any momentum going. I think among the 3 of them, they had like 2 deals and that was it. And so then like Mike and I were writing checks. So we went from like just watching the bank account just go up every week to now fast forward, like we're writing checks to keep the lights on and keep salaries paid. And so we had to sit down and say, all right, we're clearly not doing something right here. We got to figure out how we hire better, how we train better, especially with the market not cranking like it was. Like we can't just depend on market conditions. So that's when we had an outside party, that coach. It's like, here's everything we do. What do you see? And so they were able to kind of poke holes in everything we were doing. And it was a humbling experience. It wasn't fun. It took a while. You got to strip everything down, and we just kind of rebuilt everything from every single process and system that we were doing. And I'd say we really concentrated on like the recruiting, hiring, and training aspect of it.
Fascinating. So during that, so that took about a year to tear it down and rebuild it all? And you guys are still selling and trying to figure out like the direction, correct?
Yeah, and you have those questions like, why are we even doing this? Like, we're trying to rebuild this team. It definitely takes you away from your clients a little bit, but we still have that passion that like we know we can do this, we know we want this, but we got to do it the right way. And I think we just kind of jumped in pretty quickly into a great market. Still did some things right, but there was a lot of room to improve.
Do you think, I don't know if I'm going to ask this right, do you think, that first year was actually a blessing? I mean, it was. You guys made a ton of money, right? But, as hard as it was after the fact, I mean, being able to come in and get the pour gasoline on the fire kind of thing, and it just went crazy, and then it slowed down real fast. I mean, you guys you probably were able to learn a lot more, a lot quicker than anybody else, where they're incrementally growing and doing 20 million their first year and then 50 million their next year, slowly, as opposed to just 0 to 100, right? And you guys just blew the doors off. You probably, because of that, were able to learn a whole lot more. Yeah, it kind of fell apart after that, but how much better then were you able to build it because of that?
Oh, that's a great question, because one thing we did get from that is we were able to model those agents that did really well during that 2021 year. It's like, what did they have? And so now let's add that to like, this is what we're looking for as well. So if we are going to bring on a brand new agent, it's like they have to have some sort of chip on their shoulder. What is their network like? What is their ability to work hard? What does hard work mean to them? And why do they want to do this? Like, there has to be something driving them to do this. If someone says, I watched some show on Netflix or Bravo or something, and I love pretty houses, it's over at that point. Like, it's not going to translate.
How are you finding the people with the chip on their shoulder? Just a numbers game? You got to talk to enough people?
Yeah, you're talking to enough people. And in that process of like stripping everything down, again, like I don't want to go through that again, but I'm glad we did. Like, looking back on it now, I feel like that's why we have a lot of the systems and processes and mentalities that we have in place today, is going through, that hard time of like, wow, we don't have it figured out, and we do need to, kind of start over. Like you said, we got to take some steps back. It's not going to be fun, but when we move forward, we'll have a better foundation underneath us.
That's awesome. So now you've done that, right? And how are things going?
Good. So last year, we were about 79 million closed. That was over about 85 transactions, and that was with 4 agents. We are up to, excluding Mike and myself, we're up to 7 agents now. Year to date, we're at 30 million, and that's over 27 transactions.
Are you and Mike still selling?
Yes.
Okay.
We're still
Do you
selling.
have an intent to get out of the sales at some point, or do you always see yourself in selling and growing the business?
That's a good question. That's something we talk about. I mean, we still really enjoy working with clients and being part of that journey that they allow us to be part of. It's such a people business, as you know, and when you're working by referral only, yes, there's always going to be exceptions to the rule where you're like, I can't wait for this transaction to close, or this person doesn't call me at midnight every night. But for the most part, like, we get to work with some really great people, and of all price points and all walks of life, and we enjoy that side of it. And so I think there'll be a time where we maybe just like focus on like more of a specific client or price point or area. But I think we'll always kind of be involved in production in some way, shape, or form. But my goal is the team to outperform us for sure, and then we can focus more on the business, and then we can do more development and investment, because that also helps the team, because that's more listings, more attention, where we can hand to them. So, once we started the team and I had my development signs in the yard, those phone calls would go directly to the team. So any buyer that would call to get more information, or, hey, can I go see this project that's under construction? Before all that happens, we were walking them through every project so they could understand it and speak to it. So when someone does call to go see that and we hand that lead off, they can now speak to, here's what this project is, here's how this landscaping will look, here's the countertop material that is installed or about to be installed. It's not just opening the door and, do you like this house? Because if the buyer doesn't want to buy that house, hopefully they connected enough to trust that agent to find them something else. Because
I think the whole goal really is how do you get somebody to create trust over the phone? quickly, because, I don't know the stats these days on, how many people actually buy the house that they're calling on the sign on, right? It's probably pretty low, but if you can convert and you can ask the right questions, you're building a pipeline. And I think that's a great value add as a team, that you're able to then put those signs in the yard and give them those opportunities, that they're able to take, from the sign call, and even just being able to learn the project. And you're doing exactly what it sounds like your mentor did with you, and bringing them in, educating them, and then hopefully helping them build wealth through real estate down the road as well. And that's a great value to have as a team. I'm curious, as you've built this team, and you guys have been doing this, 5-6 years now, you kind of built two, right? It sounds like, to me, is how I would describe it, with how you built it and it went crazy and it was good. And then all of a sudden, you had to rebuild it again. What advice would you be giving people who, maybe they're looking to add in another person or two, or, they're just getting started in their team building journey? What does that look like for them? What would not look like for them, but what should they be thinking about, I should say, that they're going into that? So
I think first and foremost, because I'll have agents like, hey, I'm thinking about, doing a team. Can we have coffee? First question, why do you want a team? And I think a lot of agents will just say, well, it just seems like the next step, and this is what I was told I should do, which is not true. I think if you are building a team, it's because you truly want a team. You enjoy the mentorship side of it. I also was doing it to kind of get a little bit of leverage back, of time. Even though it can be very time intensive, it's also great when, if you're covered up with something, or you're out of town, having a team member show a listing or meet a client, or having that infrastructure where, like, we can hand these things out and get open houses covered, that can be a huge benefit for the client and for myself, because our big pitch is like, you're not just getting me, you're getting our whole team, and for the price of one, because all of us will know your listing. So the first thing is, why do you want a team, and explore that. And I kind of go into what it kind of means to have a team, and like, you are responsible for these people and their success and their growth. Then there's so many different team models out there. Are you providing leads? Are you providing guidance and mentorship? Are you going off the listing agent and buyer's agent model, showing agent model? Is everyone their own agent? I think kind of exploring which model is going to work. Now, I'm not saying one's better than the other. You got to find the one that's right for you. And I think also, how big or small do you want your team? We all know people that are like, hey, we're a team of 4. We're lean and mean. This is all we'll ever be. And there's a team in our office that's like 30 agents. They're constantly number one, and that's what they want to do. And I'm like, great. Like, I don't think that's right or wrong. That's just what they chose to do. I don't want a team of 30, personally. But I do see the value in having, some scale where you have multiple producers, because everyone kind of has their niche and their personality. And when we have an opportunity for them, we can say, you know what, this person would match up really well with this lead, or this person really knows the Texas Hill Country well, and this person wants to be out in the Texas Hill Country. Let's match them two up, instead of just like, hey, buyer's a buyer, go take them, and hopefully you learn the Texas Hill Country.
That's awesome. And those are some great questions for people to be thinking about when building a team. I feel like most of the time people end up building a team because they're so darn busy and they're drowning in work. They just bring somebody in, and then they start throwing business at them, and then the business falls apart, or the deals fall apart, and they blame the person, but there's really no training and there's no value. And it's just sort of a hodgepodge of how it even sort of comes together, and there's really no thought behind it. So I think your questions around what's your team going to look like? What's the size going to look like? Really, what's the point? What's the purpose? I think we all ask ourselves that, especially when you're in it and you're building it and things are tough, or you're having to rebuild, right? And you're going, what am I doing? Maybe this is a good idea to get out if I have to, who knows, right? But when you're clear on what you're doing and why you're doing it and the goals that you're trying to achieve to get there, it becomes a little easier, right? And you know what you're looking for, who you're looking for, and all that stuff. So I think great advice there. Before we wrap, a couple of things. One question.
Can I add one
go ahead.
Onto that? I think if someone's looking to build out their team, or they're looking at their team right now, I think probably the most crucial hire is your director of operations. That person that is running the day-to-day, that this person probably does not want to be a realtor, but they're incredibly organized, very system-oriented. Everything has to have a system. from, how you enter a contract, how your contract to close goes, pre-list, like everything just has to be so dialed in, not only for the team to run smoothly, but for that client experience to be at such a high level where they're just like, wow, you guys are just dialed in on every facet. So instead of trying to find agents first, that's the person I would recommend looking for, is find a really, really good, highly organized director of operations, and you have to remove yourself from a lot of that equation. Let them take the wheel. They're going to do the things that we're not good at. They're going to do at a much higher level than we will. They probably don't want to show any houses. They don't want to do a buyer consult and listing appointments. Like, that's probably like a nightmare to them. I know it is for Callie. But she's incredible at what she does. It makes life easy for us. And then you can start building out that team. Because if you start bringing agents in and it's not organized and they can't get, a higher level of service and mentorship and increase their business, they're gone. And now you just have this revolving door. So I would say take your time, build it right, find that person, develop all the systems, be highly process oriented, figure out the culture you want. That's where we've really found like our secret sauce of, running that. And, every one of our team members is like, what would we do without Callie? And I'm like, I don't know. She went on vacation for 8 days and I wanted to crawl under the table and just wait till she came back.
Yeah, a good admin will double, triple your business, right? And especially on that when it's your first hire, like you're talking about. And I also think it's the value that you're providing to those people. Again, so many people think about, well, if I'm just going to give them a better split, or I'm going to give a ton of leads, or they can work, their own business and do buyer, seller, do it all. But there's no admin. You still got to do your paperwork. You still got to do all this. You're still going to, and it's like, okay, but if that's the case, why wouldn't I just do it on my own? Right? Like,
yeah.
What am I doing here? So really helping somebody free up the time and let them do the dollar producing activities that the company needs, right, to grow, that they need to make money, that makes it really a win-win. And I agree with you. And I don't think people put the time and effort into finding the right person as much as they should. But when you find that right person, it's an absolute game changer, which it sounds like you did.
And pay them.
Pay
them what they're worth.
Yeah. Okay, so a question I love to ask the guests on the show is, what's the funniest thing that's happened to you since you've been in real estate?
Funniest thing that's happened? Man, I have to think about that.
And I never prep anybody for this question because I love just off the cuff, and I have no idea what you're going to tell me. And, sometimes they're insane, and, other times maybe not so insane.
I think everyone has like a good showing story where you walk in on someone. I remember there was I think it was a police officer that had like a long shift, and, we had scheduled the appointment, and I think he just forgot about it, because when it was all confirmed and everything, whenever I open the door, I always kind of yell, like announce my presence on an occupied home. And you make your way to the bedroom, and he looks like he got out of the shower and passed out on his bed. And so that's what we walked in on. And there was a firearm there, just from like getting off duty. So that was certainly interesting. Like, what, let's maybe go out here. You never know when he wakes up.
Did he wake up while you were there?
He kind of started rolling over, and because he heard us talking, and I was like, it's Tim. Like, remember, I just scheduled this with you. Sorry, I didn't realize you were still here.
I'm surprised you didn't leave.
Just stared at him. Mike has the stories. Like, he's walked in on like 2 people having sex on showings.
I don't even know how you react to that at that moment, but yeah.
Yeah, we had some follow-up questions that probably
Yeah, we can just leave that to your imagination. But you always get to see some fun things and hear some fun stories in this business. There's always the horror stories of how deals go south, but I always like to hear, what's the funniest thing that somebody's witnessed or experienced.
Yeah,
so, appreciate you sharing.
So. Agent crawled through a doggy door because he couldn't get the lockbox open, so he just crawled through a doggy door. And the sellers were watching him on camera, calling like, "What is this guy doing? Why is he going through our doggy door right now?"
And he's doing whatever it takes to get that house sold. It's commitment.
Yes. They were pissed though. Like, this guy, like, we're just a little B&E right now.
Well, Tim, so for those who have a referral in Austin or just want to catch up with you and learn more about how you've built your business, how do people find you?
Probably the best way would be on social media. So like on Instagram, it's Tim underscore Landy, no R, Landy, or Landy Frost Group on Instagram. You can also email us. It's just tim@landyfrostgroup.com. We go by LFG, kind of plays off of each other there.
I like that. Yeah. Clever. Well, awesome, man. I really appreciate your time today. Appreciate you sharing and being vulnerable about, even how great it was and then how hard it was and having to start over and all of that. And I think that's been wonderful. Appreciate having you on the show. And, for those out there listening, appreciate you following us and watching the show. Stay tuned for the next episode of Realty Resilience. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Realty Resilience. Be sure to join our free Realty Resilience Facebook group where real estate professionals connect, share strategies, and access resources. You can also follow us on Instagram, like us on Facebook, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more insights. And remember, we release new episodes every 2 weeks. See you next time.